This is Ayzia. I'm going to be graphing my piecewise function. My first function states that when x is less than or equal to negative 2, my first function will be negative x squared plus 1. So I already graphed it. So down here, when x is equal to negative 2, my y value will be negative 3. And I use a closed circle to indicate that x can be equal to negative 2. And as I move on to when x is equal to negative 3, my y value will be negative 8, and so on. My y-axis on my graph doesn't extend as far as I need it to, so I'm just going to draw an arrow to indicate that my graph keeps going as x goes towards infinity. The next part of my function states that when x is greater than negative 2 but less than 5, my function will be x cubed. So starting at negative 2, my y value will be negative 8, and I use an open circle to indicate that x cannot equal negative 2. So moving on from negative 2 to negative 1, y is going to be negative 1. From 1, y is also going to be 1. And from 2, it's going to be 8. And from 3 and 4 and 5, it extends off my graph. But at value 5, it's going to be an open circle at y is equal to 125 to indicate that 5 cannot be equal, that my function cannot be equal to 5. My last function states that when x is greater than or equal to 5, the function will be the square root of x. And for the values between 5 and 8, they're all numbers between 2 and 3, which are just decimals. So it's just going to curve slightly upward like that until it reaches 9, where it hits 3. And it's going to keep going, surely, it's going to keep going towards x to infinity. To move on to my domain is going to be negative infinity to infinity, because this function shows that my x values are just going to keep going to negative infinity, and my graph doesn't have anything stopping it. And I know it's going to be going towards infinity because even though this function at 5, it doesn't have a value, this function has a value at 5, and it's moving towards infinity. So there's no empty spaces or anything. There's no x value that my function can't be. My range is also going to be negative infinity to infinity. Once again, negative infinity because this function right here, because it's moving down, I'm going to have all possible negative y values. And this function as well shows that I'm going to have y values right here, even though it stops at 5. And this function also indicates that even though it's moving up slowly, it's still going to reach infinity or somewhere up there. Moving on to symmetry, there's no symmetry. It's not the same across any origin or axis. Discontinuities, yes, there are 2 jumps. One at negative 2, it jumps right here. And then there's another jump at 5, even though we can't see it. It's from this graph. When the function is 5 for this graph, it equals 125. But for this graph, it's 2.2. So it's going to be a jump right there. And there are no asymptotes. So thank you for watching.